everyone, and welcome to the Debrief on ABC News Live. I'm Kimberly Brooks. Thanks so much for joining us. A big celebration for the World Cup champions, and we're right there at the parade. Plus, we're keeping you updated on the UK ambassador, Kim Derrick, who resigned after those memos leaked. And we have the updates on the situation at the border. But first, here are your headlines.
Federal appeals court judges in New Orleans raising some serious questions about the Affordable Care Act, challenge to the law brought by 18 states. It all revolves around the individual mandate and the previous Supreme Court decision written by Chief Justice John Roberts.
He said it all hinges on this idea that the individual mandate, that requirement that all Americans purchase health insurance or face a fine, is a tax. And that's the only reason why this whole thing can stand, because Congress has the power to tax. The mandate essentially qualifies as a tax.
Family of a little girl who fell to her death from a docked cruise ship in Puerto Rico was put up on a wooden railing by her grandfather. The girl's family now says he thought there was a window there. When he was playing with the girl on Sunday, she fell 11 stories.
A spokesperson for the family of Disney Channel actor Cameron Boyce says he died from a seizure as a result of epilepsy. Funeral arrangements are pending.
Let's put it on.
Put what on?
The last suit you'll ever wear.
That was actor Rip Torn along with Will Smith in Men in Black. Torn's career in movies, TV, and on stage lasted 7 decades. He won an Emmy for his role on HBO's The Larry Sanders Show. Torn died yesterday. No cause of death was given. He was 88 years old.
In Cleveland, the American League held off the National League 4-3 in the 90th Major League Baseball All-Star Game. Indians hurler Shane Bieber, the game MVP, striking out the side in the 5th.
And we begin with the celebration fit for a champion, or rather champions. New York City is holding a ticker tape parade for Team USA, the Women's World Cup champions. And our Aaron Katersky is right there in the thick of all of it, and he joins us live. Aaron, what is the scene like right now?
Well, right behind me, they're cleaning up all the confetti that showered down on the U.S. women's national team in celebration of their 2019 World Cup victory. They're off at City Hall now on stage with Mayor de Blasio to receive the key to the city, the latest heroes to be feted through this canyon of heroes, this stretch of Broadway here in Lower Manhattan that has hosted parades since 1886, beginning with the dedication of the Statue of Liberty. And since Lady Liberty, you had to wait till 2015. And the ladies of the U.S. women's team to be honored for their World Cup victory to get an all-female honoree. And now they're doing it for the second time. This is the first parade to go by since that one in 2015. So it's becoming a bit of a tradition. And you could see the joy on the faces, not only of the players, but also the fans below as the women rode by on open-air floats and buses, especially young kids, Kimberly, who were all decked out with faces painted and red, white, and blue bandanas wrapped in American flags in order to celebrate their heroes.
Yes, it's absolutely amazing. And you mentioned Mayor de Blasio. He made some comments this morning about equal pay as well, right? He's supporting the women's team in that fight.
There was a lot of support for the women's team and their political causes, and I think that that's a reflection of the inspiration that they provide, not only on the field for young soccer players, but for young women in general. And I was talking to one mom, a mother of 3 young daughters, who was brought to tears in speaking about the women's team and their political causes and their willingness to speak up and speak out. Today, before the parade began, the mayor spoke about equal pay. The governor signed a bill that he says closes a loophole that still allows men to be paid more than women. So they are getting a lot of political attention, even invited to Capitol Hill to visit with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi following this celebration.
Pretty awesome. And now are you going to go back into the thick of it, Aaron?
I mean, I don't know. Once you get in and then you get out, it's a little bit hard to tell what to do. But I have to tell you, when you were in that crowd, 10 deep along Broadway, and to see the excitement of soccer fans, young and old, and it was really a neat moment. Megan Rapinoe kind of leaned back, her red sunglasses, her purple hair, against a big crowd. She took a selfie of herself just to relish in this crowd. You could tell how much the players enjoyed this as much as the fans did.
Pretty awesome. Thank you so much. And it's so amazing to see them celebrating like that. It's incredible. And guys, if you don't catch the champs at the parade, you can see them at the ESPYs tonight on ABC. So now we move overseas. The UK's ambassador to the U.S. is resigning after leaked memos showed him calling President Trump both inept and incompetent. So I want to bring in James Longman in London with more. James, a quick turn of events here. It seems like Kim Derrick felt like this was his only choice.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, he's a diplomat, and he did the diplomatic thing. He stepped back because ultimately this was a story that was becoming about him. He was at the center of a storm, and he did the thing that he really had no choice in the end but to do. He released a statement earlier today saying, "Since the leak of official documents from this embassy, there's been a great deal of speculation surrounding my position and the duration of my remaining term as ambassador. I want to put an end to that speculation." He goes on to say the current situation is making it impossible for me to carry out my role as I would like. And he's referring there to being blocked basically from the White House already on 2 occasions. We know a banquet for the Emir of Qatar, was disinvited to that, wasn't able to attend a meeting on trade. And ambassadors, they deal in access. And if you don't have the access, you can't do your job anymore. So he has stepped back. But I've got to tell you, Kimberly, there's been a big reaction to it here. A lot of anger that this has happened, a lot of anger with the person who leaked these memos, saying that they've done a great disservice to this country. There's a lot of pride in Britain about its foreign service, about its civil service, the idea that it is detached from politics. And they've seen during this scandal, the politicization of our civil service. And I think that's probably what has fueled the anger here. Also, basically, it seems that our future Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, our possible future Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, in a debate last night, refused really to openly back Sir Kim Derrick. His opposite candidate, Jeremy Hunt, was asked the question, would you leave Sir Kim Derrick in position? And he said he absolutely would. He would support him as ambassador. Boris Johnson was asked the same question, and he said he wouldn't. So I think the sense is that Sir Kim Derrick saw in his potential future boss someone who wasn't going to back him up, and he was left with no choice but to step back.
Yes, and James, just again, what does this do to the relationship between the U.S. and the UK?
Well, this country cherishes its relationship with the United States. It's called the special relationship, but I think there's never really been parity. If we're honest, it's always about the UK just trying to kind of test the water to see what the US wants us to do in all manner of things. But I think really there's a sense now that after Sir Kim's resignation, you know, this is the potential for the UK to be just doing the US's backing, the US's bidding. Is really going to be kind of go much further in the future, especially after we leave the European Union. There's a lot of anger directed at Boris Johnson for has taken the stance that he's taken on this, particularly since in the past he's said pretty disparaging things about President Trump, saying that he was unqualified to be president of the United States. So, you know, I think this has the potential to really undo the relationship in the short term, perhaps. I think Boris Johnson, the reason why he's done that is that he would view the potential career prospects of an individual as not as important as the relationship between the US and the UK. I think he thinks that if he becomes Prime Minister, the first thing that Donald Trump's going to ask him when he goes to visit Washington, D.C. in his first few months as Prime Minister will be, you've got to get rid of that guy, Kim Derrick. He doesn't want anything to trip him up in potential trade negotiations, which will be really important. The UK will want a good trade deal with the United States. So in all of these things, the UK now will depend following its departure from Europe, and we'll wait and see if this relationship can be mended under a new Prime Minister.
All right, James Longman, right there in our London bureau. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we turn to Washington. New calls from top Democrats for the resignation of Labor Secretary Alexander Acosta. This is over his role in the controversial plea deal with registered sex offender Jeffrey Epstein a decade ago. So take a listen to what they had to say.
I am calling on Secretary Acosta to resign. It is now impossible for anyone to have confidence in Secretary Acosta's ability to lead the Department of Labor. If he refuses to resign, President Trump should fire him.
Senator Harris, can you talk to us about Secretary Acosta? You believe he should resign?
He should.
Right, and we also see that Nancy Pelosi weighed in with a tweet about him stepping down as well. And as we know, Epstein was arrested over the weekend on charges of sex trafficking of minors. So I want to bring in Karen Travers at the White House because, Karen, Alexander Acosta is a member of President Trump's cabinet. So what did the president have to say about all of this?
Well, the president for now is signaling that he supports him for the work he's done as the labor secretary. The president was asked about this yesterday in the Oval Office and says he's done a really great job as labor secretary. So he seemed to be making a distinction between his current position in the cabinet and this swirling controversy over something Acosta did a decade ago. The president, though, Kimberly, did leave some wiggle room, left the door open a little bit for him to reconsider this, saying we're going to take a close look at this. We'll have to look at it very carefully. But Kimberly, the president also says he believes that there were other people involved in the decision on that secret plea deal from a decade ago.
And Karen, what was the president's own relationship with Jeffrey Epstein?
Well, there's a quote that is now getting a lot of attention where the president in an interview in 2002 called Epstein a terrific guy. And we should note, though, that that interview was done before the accusations against Epstein were revealed. The president yesterday, though, said that he hasn't talked to him in about 15 years. He says he wasn't a fan of his. And in fact, Kimberly, the president said they had a falling out. There were a lot of questions yesterday to the president after he made that comment about what that falling out was related to. He did not answer.
And so just going back to Acosta really quick, what would happen if he does resign? What happens from there?
Well, he would then be filled with another acting secretary, and we've certainly seen that in other agencies and departments in the Trump administration. That's been a big criticism from some Democrats about how the president's had significant turnover at the cabinet level and at other senior positions. We're expecting to hear from the labor secretary later this afternoon. He's supposed to be taking questions here in Washington, perhaps trying to mount a full court press to get out there and defend himself. He yesterday issued a series of tweets saying that he was pleased to see that New York prosecutors were moving forward with this case based on what he said was new evidence. A lot of criticism of that yesterday, saying that the evidence that he's citing is actually things that he had available to him 10 years ago.
All right, Karen Travers right there at the White House. Thank you so much. And guys, we move on to an ABC News Washington Post poll that shows that 60% of Americans say abortion should be legal in almost all cases. 60%. This is the highest number the number has been in these polls since 1995. So I want to bring in our Devin Dwyer in the DC Bureau with more. Devin, 60% is pretty significant.
Yeah, it sure is, Kimberly. It's a sign that while many Americans may not like the idea of abortions, the vast majority of people still think women should have access to the procedure. In fact, if you dig down in our new poll, more than a quarter of Americans, 27%, say abortions should be legal in all cases. So a subset of that number, you see there it is, 27%. That's up 11 points from just a decade ago. On the flip side of this, 36% of people say abortions should be illegal in all cases. That's down from 45%. So support for abortion rights is up, opposition is down. Of course, all of this is coming at a time when dozens of states are passing new restrictions on abortion rights in this country. Several of those, as you know, Kimberly, banning abortion procedures outright.
And so, Devin, what does this mean for the 2020 race?
Well, it does have big political implications. As we know, Democrats see this new fight over abortion as a base energizer. They want to be talking about this. They, of course, will talk about the stakes at the Supreme Court. A lot of those restrictions we just mentioned will be headed that way. Republicans, on the other hand, at least nationally, going to want to downplay it in light of the numbers that are in a new poll. They know many Americans support these rights. But the interesting thing to keep an eye on is independents. How are independent voters going to factor in this debate over abortion? It's typically not the number one issue that people vote on, but certainly is factored in. In our new poll, 64% of independents say they support legal abortions.
All right, and so it's certainly a topic that's going to come out in the debates. And while you're here, I just want you to give us the info on the upcoming debate that's going to be hosted by ABC News.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff. We're headed to Texas, Kimberly. The third presidential Democratic primary debate will be held in Houston, Texas, coming up in September 12th and 13th. It's the first debate after Labor Day, so we'll be back-to-back nights in prime time on ABC. You can also catch it here on ABC News Live. We're doing this in partnership with our friends at Univision, so it will be translated in Spanish on that channel. Still working out the details. Don't have the moderators yet or the format or exactly where it will be held. But Kimberly, this could be a pivotal moment in the Democratic primary race because the thresholds for making that stage are going to get a little bit tighter come September. The candidates will have to reach at least 2% in 4 national polls. That's up from 1% right now. They'll also have to hit at least 130,000 different donors. That's a doubling of the bar that it is currently. So it's going to be a big moment in this race. We'll see how many of those 24 candidates right now can actually meet that bar and make the stage in Texas for the ABC debate.
Yes, very crowded. Devin Dwyer, thanks for joining us today. And of course, you're going to watch the debates, and then later you can watch Devin Dwyer, who's going to be on the briefing room at 3:30 p.m. So guys, we move on to the crisis at the border. We've been keeping you updated on the situation there. Horrific conditions inside some of these facilities where children are separated from their parents. So I want to bring in Michael Garcia Bohinick with Human Rights Watch. Michael, you've been at these facilities. I just want you to remind us of what you saw and what it was like when you actually went in.
Sure. So I was in Clint, near El Paso, a couple of weeks ago, and the conditions there are, as you said, pretty horrific. Overcrowding at that time, pretty severe overcrowding. A lot of kids telling us that they were unable to have regular access to showers, toothbrushes, that they'd been wearing the same clothes during the entire time that they'd been there, which in some cases was 2 or 3 weeks, or even more than that. We saw and frankly smelled really filthy kids as well. Some of the younger kids, I'm talking really young, 5 years, 2 years, less than a year old, had shirts that were covered with mucus and other body fluids. I saw kids who really should have been in diapers and weren't because they didn't have parents to care for them or other caregivers. I spoke to teenage girls who had been told, can you take care of this 2-year-old? And they were forced to do that on their own. And that, while shocking in itself and shocking enough for this facility that the group of us who were there went public almost immediately on this, is not unusual. We just heard this week reports from government inspectors about similar conditions in Yuma, Arizona. Another government inspection report in the Rio Grande Valley reports really extreme levels of overcrowding and really lengthy times in these detention facilities. And really everybody, including border agents, agree that these places are not fit for children.
So, Michael, what I want to ask you is, what do you think of the Trump administration denying these reports when you've seen it firsthand?
I mean, that's really counterfactual, right? I mean, the evidence is abundant. It's overwhelming. It comes from government officials as well as from our own observations. There are a variety of sources that attest to and consistently attest to these kinds of shortcomings, more than shortcomings, serious abuses in border detention facilities. The real question now is what they should be doing, and there are some obvious answers. Number one, move kids out of these facilities as quickly as possible. If that means negotiating with the Department of Health and Human Services, which is supposed to take care of these kids as promptly as possible, that's what senior border officials should be doing rather than saying these allegations aren't true when they manifestly are. It also means that border officials and health officials should be moving kids to their families. Many, if not most, have relatives in the United States who are willing and able to care for them now. And that's certainly better for everybody. It's better for kids. It's better for border agents who are being asked to do something that really isn't their job. And it's better, of course, for the taxpayers who aren't going to be footing the bill for housing kids in deeply inhumane conditions.
Yeah, I appreciate that you're actually offering some solutions. We talked to your colleague, Clara Long, last week. She's a part of the hearing today that's in Congress on this inhumane treatment. What do you guys want to get out of this hearing?
Well, I think what we first need is a real accounting of what's going on. We need a real acknowledgement from the border agency, from Customs and Border Protection, that these kinds of circumstances are not unusual, unfortunately, that consistent reports over the last few years, but in particular, the impact of this administration's policies have really deeply aggravated the situation for kids, almost to dangerous levels. We've had 6 kids die, at least 6, die either in Border Protection custody or immediately afterward, and we need to see some real taking of responsibility for that. We're not saying that the border agency should be caring for these kids. Far from that. As they themselves agree, that isn't their job. What we do need is to move quickly to the kinds of solutions we outlined. Quick placement with family members, if necessary, alternative care arrangements like state-licensed foster care facilities, some other appropriate way of handling children that doesn't involve subjecting them to really inhumane, really dangerous, really unsanitary conditions.
All right, Michael Garcia-Bohenick from Human Rights Watch, thank you so much for your input and feedback. Thank you. And guys, we move to a very tragic and heinous story out of Phoenix, causing a ton of outrage. Another black teen killed. Over the holiday weekend, 17-year-old Elijah Al-Amin was stabbed to death by a white man because the teen was listening to rap music. There was literally no other interaction. The man said the music made him feel unsafe. So I want to bring in Nohelani Graf in Phoenix with more on this story. Nohelani, I don't really have the words for what happened here. If you can just give us the latest.
So, Kimberly, your heart absolutely has to break for Elijah Al-Amin's family. First of all, they held a vigil right away so that friends and family had a way to come together and attempt to start the grieving process. And now they're in the process of planning a funeral for this unthinkable act. Then, of course, there's the suspect, Michael Adams. The state has come forward and said he will be charged with first-degree murder in this case. He's going to show up in court next week for a routine hearing as this process begins, but already the state is starting to build that case and dig back into his history. This is a man who spent nearly 3 years in prison and got out 2 days before this attack. Previously in prison for aggravated assault charges, his time extended for assaulting an officer while in prison. This time, according to witnesses, Elijah was simply filling up his gas. He pulled up, he had his speakers up, he's listening to what his sister says was probably old school hip hop because that's what he loved, and he went in to buy a soda. They also say that the suspect had just helped someone fix a light on their car and then, unprovoked, as you mentioned, walks in, stabs this young man, this 17-year-old, in the back and slits his throat, and then casually walks out and walks down the street while Elijah is left to stumble outside for help, and a bystander is trying to render aid to keep him from bleeding out on the pavement. It's absolutely horrendous.
Wow, that is so terrible. Can you just tell us what we actually do know about Elijah, his life, who he was as a young teen?
You know, as heartbreaking as this is and as devastated as his family is, they can't help but lighten up a little bit when they think about him. I mean, this is a young man who was a go-getter, just 17 years old, already working 2 part-time jobs so that he could buy that car that he was driving, and he had just paid to upgrade it even more. He was going into his senior year of high school. His sister says he was even considering getting a 3rd part-time job, and when he graduated, he wanted to do something to try and create his own business. So this was a young man with plans ahead of him, and by all accounts, just a fighter who had a bright future ahead of him. And now his family is in absolute disbelief, and at the same time trying to navigate this extreme sadness, also coupled with the extreme anger that they feel from this situation.
All right, Nohelani Graf at our ABC station in Phoenix, thanks so much for the updates on this story. We appreciate it. And guys, the weather also has turned a bit severe in the last few weeks in different parts of the country. Flash flooding, heavy rains, and even a few tornadoes. So I want to go to Rob Marciano, who can give us an update. Rob?
Hello, Kimberly. We are, yes, watching tropical development in the Gulf of Mexico, and highly confident now are we in the National Hurricane Center that this is going to become a tropical cyclone of some sort, depression or named storm today. If so, its name would be Barry. They're going to fly a Hurricane Hunter aircraft into it to check it out. It's already brought some rain to Sarasota, Florida, and now the circulation of sorts is in the northeastern Gulf. Our computer models bring it towards abreast of Louisiana by about 100 miles or south of New Orleans tomorrow morning. And then Friday morning, a little farther to the west, maybe towards Lake Charles, Lafayette area. And then computer models diverge a little bit at this point, but it's really too early to even bank on any of these. Generally speaking, South Louisiana looks to be the target, but heavy rain is going to be an issue wherever this thing's center makes landfall and points towards the east. So we're going to see some flooding with this. And the longer it is out over the Gulf, the stronger it will get. So potentially a hurricane, and anyone who lives in the upper Texas coastline, that would include Houston, all the way to the Florida Panhandle, needs to be wary of this situation and abreast of what's going on. Meanwhile, flooding across parts of Nebraska, boy, they had a wet spring, horrible flooding, and it continues into July. Nearly 9 inches of rain falling around Kearney, Nebraska. Also some severe weather in South Dakota with some flooding in Fargo, one of 4 tornadoes being reported yesterday. Our severe weather threat today gets into parts of Oklahoma. Mostly strong winds, large hail, but a few tornadoes possible. Also another blip across the UP of Michigan with some energy there. And the whole front kind of squeezes east during the day tomorrow. Pittsburgh, Syracuse, and then points east of that with strong winds, large hail, and a few tornadoes. Underneath all that action is some serious heat. We've got heat advisories up from Texas across Oklahoma, Arkansas, in through Illinois, east into parts of Alabama as well. Temperatures with the humidity will feel like up and over 100 degrees. So try to stay cool out there. And if you live in the northern Gulf of Mexico, certainly time to get prepared. Kimberly, back over to you.
All right, Rob, thank you so much. So much rain, my goodness. So guys, we're ending on some good news. Last night, I went to a screening of the live adaptation of The Lion King. I first saw this movie when I was a kid, so it was pure nostalgia, visually stunning. It feels like you're literally in the Serengeti. And not to mention the star-studded cast, including Donald Glover and Beyonce as the voices of Simba and Nala. It's as amazing as you would expect. And if the movie didn't have everyone in full Wakanda mode, the LA premiere definitely did. Check out these pics of Beyonce and Blue Ivy draped, my people, draped like royalty on the red carpet. And when Beyonce makes an appearance, you know there's always more. She has a new single from the movie that dropped last night, and a full album is on the way. Unbelievable. Slay, right? So my friends, continue to take care of yourselves. And if you're around, you can stick around for the briefing room at 3:30 p.m. Then you can check out World News Prime at 8 p.m. And if you want to stay updated on all of these headlines, you can go to abcnews.com or download the app. I'm Kimberly Brooks, and I'll see you tomorrow.